Rain has always been the ultimate wild card in Formula 1, a force of nature that turns strategy into survival and separates champions from the rest. And when the grid lined up at Spa-Francorchamps, everyone knew what was coming. Teams gambled on setups, drivers braced themselves, and fans tuned in with the expectation of a storm-fueled thriller. But what they got instead was a showcase of hesitation. The FIA once again chose caution over competition. The Belgian Grand Prix, hype for its drama, its danger, its history, was stalled, subdued, and stripped of its soul. And leading the chorus of outrage, none other than Max Verstappen, a driver who lives for conditions like these. His frustration wasn't just about timing or tactics. It was about the slow death of a racing culture that once embraced adversity. Jesus, they're way too cautious, he snapped after the delayed start. And he wasn't wrong. The race didn't begin in the rain, it began after it dried. And in doing so, the FIA signaled something far more dangerous than wet weather. Fear. Verstappen wasn't the only one incensed. The decisions made at Spa echoed through the paddock like a thunderclap. Fans who waited hours for action got barely a handful of laps. Teams that built their entire race strategy around wet conditions were caught flat-footed by last-minute FIA conservatism. Wet tires, those blue-striped marvels built to conquer the most treacherous of circuits, were once again ignored. Instead, intermediates were fitted for a track that demanded more grip, more control, and more trust in the drivers. But trust was in short supply. What used to be a test of skill has become a waiting game, a protocol-driven spectacle that sidelines racing in favor of optics. And that's where the real danger lies. What makes this situation even more painful is how predictable it was. Everyone knew rain was coming to Spa. Wasn't a surprise, it was a forecast. Yet the FIA acted like they were caught off guard, like the downpour was some unexpected disaster. Race control's insistence on waiting for the rain to completely stop before allowing any real racing felt like an insult to every driver who's ever excelled in the wet. Legends have been made in those conditions. Senna, Schumacher, Hamilton all thrived when the skies opened up, and in recent years, Verstappen added his name to that list. Remember Brazil 2016, or last year's Interlagos performance from P17 to the podium. These weren't races to fear, they were races that defined careers. But instead of building on that legacy, the FIA seems intent on erasing it, and the reasoning behind this shift isn't hard to trace. In the aftermath of tragic losses like Antoine Hubert in 2019 and Delano van Tiehoff in 2023, the sport has understandably grown more cautious. No one disputes the need for safety, but there's a fine line between protecting drivers and undermining the very competition they sign up for. Formula One is the pinnacle of motorsport. It's supposed to be dangerous, challenging, unpredictable. If the bar for racing is a dry, perfect track, then we're not watching Formula One anymore. We're watching glorified time trials, and that's exactly what happened at Spa. The result? A farce. Cars built for high downforce, tuned for wet traction, left stranded on a circuit that dried too quickly for their setups to shine. Charles Leclerc, Carlos Sainz, even Verstappen himself, fall compromised. And what did fans get? A watered-down version of what could have been one of the most memorable races of the season. Instead of celebrating the chaos and courage of a classic wet Grand Prix, we were left with a procedural crawl toward mediocrity. And it's not just fans who are noticing. Broadcasters, commentators, and even figures like Jeremy Clarkson have criticized the direction the FIA is taking. Their concern isn't just about one race, it's about the message being sent across the entire sport. There's an even deeper frustration brewing beneath the surface, and it's one that speaks to the very mechanics of how Formula One operates. At the center of this controversy lies a paradox. The FIA has at its disposal one of the most advanced wet weather racing tools in motorsport, the full wet tire. Yet in the last several rain-affected weekends, that tire has been virtually ignored. The full weights, capable of dispersing tens of liters of water per second, are designed for exactly the kind of conditions we saw at Spa. But when the formation lap began, every single driver was on intermediates despite the spray being heavy and visibility low. So why are these tires not being used? The answer, disturbingly, is political. Teams have grown used to intermediates. The wet tires take longer to warm up, and with the FIA's current policies around standing starts, safety cars, and visibility thresholds, there's no incentive to use them. But the root of the problem lies not in the tires themselves but in how the race directors treat wet conditions. They've set a precedent. The moment spray becomes too thick, the race pauses. And so, the blue-striped tires, which could actually help improve conditions by clearing water, are left untouched. It's a vicious cycle, one that kills competition and erodes confidence in the FIA's decision-making. Even Lewis Hamilton, ever diplomatic, couldn't hide his confusion. There was almost a dry line, he noted, advocating for a standing start toward the end. This wasn't a reckless demand. It was an experienced call from a driver whose one race is in conditions. Far worse. It should have been listened to. But instead, the FIA stuck to their template, rolling out a process that didn't suit the moment. And this raises a critical point. If the FIA can't adapt its procedures based on conditions, then it's no longer a reactive governing body, it's a rigid institution. That's the kind of inflexibility that kills the spontaneity, excitement, and risk that Formula One is built on. But it doesn't end with tires or even just this one. Grand Prix. The controversy at Spa is part of a much larger conversation about the sport's direction and the leadership behind it. President Mohammed bin Sulayem has been facing mounting criticism for his role in fostering this overly cautious climate. Under his watch, race directors have leaned toward maximum risk aversion, often to the detriment of the competition. It's a trend that's begun to alienate drivers, teams, and fans alike. Spa was simply the tipping point. When both Verstappen and Hamilton publicly question race control, you know something is wrong at the core. That beyond the immediate frustration, there's growing anxiety about how this will shape the future of Formula One's most iconic circuits. Spa has always been a fan favorite, but its place on the calendar is now uncertain. The new deal pushes it into a rotation system, potentially sidelining it in 2028 and 2030. And what's the justification? Safety concerns linked to its unpredictable weather. It's as if F1 is actively punishing circuits for being difficult, for being exciting. The narrative is slowly shifting. Circuits like Spa are being pushed out, while sanitized, weather-safe venues are ushered in. If this continues, we'll lose not just Spa, but everything it represents: challenge, history, unpredictability. And there's one more player in this puzzle who deserves scrutiny: Mario Isala, head of Pirelli. As the supplier of F1's tires, his team should be pushing for the optimal use of their products. Yet the blue weights are clearly underutilized. Where's the pushback? Where's the innovation? Why are drivers not being encouraged to explore those limits? The silence is telling, and it suggests a sport that's more interested in maintaining a clean image than delivering raw, thrilling racing. If this continues, if the FIA allows one more weekend like Spa to go down in history as another wasted opportunity, then it's not just the race directors who need to answer tough questions. It's the entire governance of the sport. Budapest is next. Rain is in the forecast again, and now there's widespread concern. Will the FIA allow drivers to race, or will they force another neutered procession around the track while fans watch helplessly? The issue isn't capability, it's confidence. The drivers have the skill, the teams have the technology. The question is whether the FIA has the courage to let Formula One be Formula One. And if not, if we continue to see the rain used as an excuse to stop racing, then what's left? The thrill, the edge, the awe. Formula One was never supposed to be safe in every sense of the word. It was supposed to push limits, reward bravery, and test the impossible. When drivers like Verstappen and Hamilton, who've given everything to this sport, say they're disappointed, that should send alarm bells ringing through the FIA headquarters. Because what's being lost here isn't just good racing, trust. We're now left with a question that shouldn't have to be asked. Can Formula One still race in the rain? If not, then we're no longer watching the greatest drivers in the world defy physics and fear. We're watching a heavily managed, show-polished, controlled, and deeply compromised. And if something doesn't change soon, the damage could be irreversible. F1 fans don't just want spectacle, they want substance. They want real racing. And that starts with letting drivers do what they're trained to do. Even when the skies open up, if you believe the soul of racing is worth protecting, now's the time to speak up. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think the FIA has gone too far? And what would you do to bring real racing back to Formula One? If you're still holding on to the hope that courage and chaos can live side by side in this sport, hit that like button, subscribe for more truth in racing, and share this video with someone who knows F1 should never back down from the rain.